Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world. Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, March 25th, 2024. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. And we thank our friends at Fluor for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. There's a lot of talk these days about the nuclear renaissance, a rebirth of nuclear energy as the nation moves toward a carbon-free power grid over the coming decades. An environmental cleanup at Department of Energy facilities is playing an important role in the revival of nuclear. This is most evident at the East Tennessee Technology Park in Oak Ridge, where a number of nuclear companies have located on the former site of the Oak Ridge gaseous diffusion plant. Federally owned land there has been transferred to the local community for private development. The industry is staking much of its future on small modular reactor concepts. SMRs can be sited at locations not suitable for larger nuclear power plants. Prefabricated units can be manufactured and then shipped and installed on site, making them more affordable to build than large power reactors. SMRs offer savings in cost and construction time, and they can be deployed incrementally to match increasing energy demand. A recent study by E4 Carolinas looked at the growth of nuclear energy in 5 southeastern states: Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia. The impact of nuclear in these states is impressive, and it continues to grow. This 5-state region is home to 25 of the nation's 94 nuclear reactors. On average, these states get 37% of their electricity from nuclear, far above the national average of 19%. From fuel to plant operations to waste disposal and research on new reactor concepts, there are nearly 500 nuclear companies with more than 1,600 locations in the 5-state region. We'll have more on this report and on the importance of environmental cleanup in spurring the nuclear renaissance after this from Fluor. We start our discussion today with an executive from United Cleanup Oak Ridge, or UCOR, the Department of Energy's cleanup contractor in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Well, our guest now is Ashley Saunders. Ashley is a member of the executive team of United Cleanup Oak Ridge, or UCOR, which is the DOE lead environmental cleanup contractor for the Oak Ridge Reservation. She heads up program and sustainability management, and part of her portfolio includes beneficial land reuse and reindustrialization. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be with you today.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Cleaning up the East Tennessee Technology Park was a massive undertaking. Some people have called it the largest environmental cleanup project in the world, since it involved the first ever teardown of a complete gaseous diffusion complex. To give people an idea, or viewers and listeners an idea of what was involved, can you sort of talk about what it took to clean up that 2,200 acre site and make it ready for new industries?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you suggested, the scale is almost hard to imagine. But I'll start out by saying I think the only way that we could have accomplished what we have in Oak Ridge and at ETTP is keeping safety at the forefront of our mission. And so I'm proud to say UCOR is a VPP star company, and all of our sites have been recognized as such. And we just went through a recertification, so that's a really big pride point for us. But as it relates to the scale of the cleanup work, so the ETTP or K25 site consisted of 5 massive gaseous diffusion process buildings. At the time they were constructed, they were some of the largest buildings in the world. And that was accompanied by over 500 ancillary or support facilities. So all of those buildings had to be cleaned up, demolished, and disposed of to complete UCOR's and DOE's Vision 2020, which we accomplished ahead of schedule and under budget. But subsequently, we have been working on the soil remediation at the site, and we are honing in on our Vision 2024 achievement, which we will accomplish later this year, which is the remaining soil cleanup of the site. And that's really the last hurdle that stands between us and full opportunity to reuse the site for economic development. So those were the major milestones that put us on this path to reuse. And then will still be working in partnership with our regulators to establish groundwater decisions for the remaining cleanup at the site.
Well, it was a huge job, and UCOR got a lot of credit and accolades for successfully completing it and doing it safely, as you say. So I know that's one of the most important and biggest cleanup projects that DOE has in its entire cleanup program. DOE had a vision for this former uranium enrichment site to turn it into a private industrial park that would attract new industry and help to grow the economy of Oak Ridge and the region. And that's being accomplished by the transfer of this cleaned up land from the government to the local community. Can you tell us about the land transfer and how that works and how much has been transitioned to the community to date?
Sure. So as you mentioned there, this has been a vision of DOE's for a long time. And in Oak Ridge, we were really ahead of the game because we've done a unique approach to federal land reuse in which we've been doing what we call the reindustrialization of the ETTP site for over 30 years. So the reuse and transfer of this land has been going on alongside cleanup for decades. So basically, as a piece of property is cleaned up, we're able to then put it into a transfer process. Historically, we've used our community reuse organization. The one that we have here in East Tennessee is called Crowet, to transfer that land to them, and then they're able to market it for companies who want a site here in Oak Ridge and really grow the local economy. But so to date, we have transferred 1,600 acres for economic development purposes. We've transferred another 3,500 acres for conservation, and then 100 acres for historic preservation. So you can kind of see that there's this mixed use opportunity at the site. It's not just a great place to come and site your nuclear business or your green energy or technology business, but there are really livability components, natural asset components, things that are real attractant. So DOE had a vision, and it's exciting to see that come to fruition as this transfer is taking place.
Well, you mentioned National Historic Preservation. Oak Ridge is part of the Manhattan Project National Park, and the K25 footprint, I guess, is being included in the national park. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I understand you have a viewing platform under construction there now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really exciting part of the job that we get to do here. So we already have a museum that's open at the site. It's called the K-25 History Center. It's run by the American Museum of Science and Energy, so that's a great partnership with the Department of Energy, but it's open to the public out at the site, and we're currently under construction on a viewing platform. So that's going to give visitors an elevated view of the K-25 footprint, so they can really understand the size and scale and magnitude of that amazing kind of engineering and construction achievement. But it's all integrated with the national park and their interpretive responsibility. There will be in the future some wayside exhibits and some wayfinding around the site as we delineate the footprint itself. So it's really going to be an immersive experience for visitors when they come to Oak Ridge.
Well, the East Tennessee Technology Park, which I think is also known as the Heritage Center, seems to be working as expected and in keeping with DOE's vision. A number of nuclear-related companies have located there, and some of these companies are playing a key role in the nuclear renaissance with their advanced reactor concepts and fuel concepts. Can you tell us about some of the companies that have been attracted to the park?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, we've got several tier one or anchor tenants that have already sited here, both at the Heritage Center site, which is our brownfield site, and the Horizon Center, which is its sister site, which is formerly DOE land, but a greenfield site. So just a few to mention, you may have heard of Kairos Power. They're an advanced reactor company who's going to build a test reactor here in Oak Ridge. They have already gone through their NRC process. Their site is here on the 3133 footprint. They own that site, which was the former site of two of the gaseous diffusion buildings at Heritage Center. So that's a really exciting business to have here. We also have Ultra Safe Nuclear Company. They're a nuclear fuels company for nuclear energy, and they actually purchased one of the spec buildings at the site and have begun operations. And then Triso X, which is associated to X Energy, which produces Triso fuels for nuclear energy there. They've broken ground at the Horizon Center. So all three of those are really exciting big tenants as it relates to the nuclear renaissance. But we've also been drawing in more of those second and third tier suppliers as well. So there are other members of the nuclear supply chain or ecosystem who want to be at the table. So that's really encouraging. We've seen companies like Analytics and Measurement Services, Kinetrix, and then we've also got several other interested parties for some of the remaining land at the site, and quite frankly, we're running out of available land. So it's sort of a winner's problem that we have on our hands.
Well, it is. It is a winner's problem, and it's fueling the nuclear renaissance in Tennessee and indeed in the Southeast. Why do you think these companies find the East Tennessee Technology Park and Heritage Center such a good place to call home?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few advantages and attractants to this area. First and foremost, this is a nuclear friendly and savvy community. Nuclear is our history, and people are very understanding and accepting of this industry. I think another attractant for the site is just the amount of data that is available for some of this former federal land. There's reassurance that there's clean land available and that it has a lot of data that can actually support the NRC process. So it can be a time and money saver for some of the nuclear businesses that are siting here. In fact, we've experienced a lot of positive support in the siting process. Some of the public meetings that have been held for the NRC for the companies that have come to Oak Ridge have really been met with resounding support by the community. So that's been encouraging. There's also proximity to major players in research and education. University of Tennessee, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, TVA's in our backyard, and they're also going to be putting their small modular reactor on the Clinch breeder site. So the ecosystem is really here to support them. And as I mentioned earlier, East Tennessee is a beautiful place to live. We have a really high quality of life, really enhanced livability here. And I think it's just makes it really attractive to these companies.
And part of what appeals to them, I'm sure, is the availability of a workforce, the ready availability of a workforce, trained people who are ready to go to work. It's very important to these companies and to their growth. UCOR plays a major role in helping to prepare the nuclear workforce of the future. Can you tell us about some of the things you're doing in workforce development?
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. There is a recognition that there's a very highly skilled and trained nuclear workforce here, whether that's, construction, operations, professional, all across the business. There's a really robust pipeline, and it's something we've been thinking about and working on for the better part of a decade. We as UCOR has grown over those last 10 years, and looking across the landscape, we're have other partner contractors here in Oak Ridge who also need the same resources for their mission. So we saw there's a generational challenge coming with retirements and needing to get new professionals into the workplace, new craft folks interested in doing our kind of work in Oak Ridge. So we've spent the better part of a decade investing in that pipeline of the nuclear workforce that we have for UCOR, but it really supports the greater Oak Ridge mission and professional community. We've known for a long time that there was going to be a challenge in meeting the workforce needs of the future in Oak Ridge. And just between the federal sites that are here and the different missions that they support, but also as we've seen this growth coming, we recognize that we have to invest in the pipeline of the nuclear workforce. So we've been doing that for the better part of a decade, whether it's through our partnership with labor, at our technical colleges, Roane State and Pellissippi State. We've established chemical operators programs because all of these nuclear facilities need qualified chemical operators. So those are those technical degrees. We've also got 4-year and advanced degree programs that we partnered with. So Tennessee Tech in Middle East Tennessee has just stood up their nuclear engineering program, and we're partnered with them. And we've had a long-standing relationship with the University of Tennessee, who's had a nuclear one of the nation's top nuclear engineering programs. They've also got an environmental management nuclear decommissioning minor that they stood up in partnership with us, recognizing that the business that we're in is the nuclear life cycle, and so we need to be able to attract those folks who are interested in helping us close that nuclear life cycle. So there's a really robust pipeline. It's been built to be able to scale to support the needs of this growth. So we're very fortunate to be in a position where we've already made these investments, and so we're able to continue to call on those resources to populate the nuclear workforce of the future.
Well, all of these things taken together, the workforce availability of the workforce, the cleaned up land at ETTP, the recruitment of these nuclear industries that are part of the nuclear renaissance have formed a critical mass, if you will, that's attracted the attention of Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee. He has created the state's first nuclear advisory council and earmarked $50 million in state funds to recruit more industries. What do you think the governor's actions say about the role of Oak Ridge and the state as a whole in the role it'll play in the nuclear renaissance?
I think the governor has put Tennessee in the position to lead the nation in nuclear energy. It's really exciting to see such a commitment and investment at the state level. As you may know, Ken Reuter, UCOR's president and CEO, serves on that Nuclear Energy Advisory Council for the governor and leads the regulatory work group. And some of the the recommendations that council has made to the governor are really focused here in Oak Ridge, and those are to help continue to grow the nuclear ecosystem. And so not only to, as we attract those tier one companies, but how do we put a robust support system in place with their tiered vendors, with that livability factor? So really thinking through what that long-term sustainable plan for nuclear growth in Oak Ridge looks like. And then how can we use some of the models of partnering with our regulators? In this case, of course, it would be the NRC in the state of Tennessee, but partnering with regulators or using the formula of federal land reuse to really fast track the availability of land and the ability for these companies to come here site and get their operations started.
Well, finally, Ashley, UCOR has a slogan that says the future begins with cleanup. And I'm wondering how important you think environmental cleanup is in positioning Oak Ridge for the nuclear industry of the future. What role does cleanup play in that?
I think that cleanup is vital to the future of nuclear energy. We are, as I mentioned, probably the first site and maybe only site to truly close the nuclear life cycle and start it again. We're very much footprint constrained in East Tennessee. It's a beautiful place, but there's not a lot of flat land. And so our ability to clean up and put land back in the hands of either the nuclear industry for commercial energy production, or one of the enduring DOE missions here is really vital for their growth and their development. So that nuclear life cycle can start again. I think, the Department of Energy is really investing in cleanup to clean energy, but I don't think you can see that story any better represented than it is here in Oak Ridge. We've really kind of paced the nation in the complex as it relates to growth through cleanup.
Well, Ashley Saunders of UCOR, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Mike.
To provide more perspective on the nuclear renaissance, we visited with Dr. Wes Hines, head of the Nuclear Engineering Department at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Well, our guest now is Dr. Wes Hines. Wes is head of the Nuclear Engineering Department at the University of Tennessee, one of the leading nuclear engineering departments in the country. Welcome to the podcast, Wes.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you, and we're talking about the nuclear renaissance in this episode. And I'd like to start by asking you, in your position as head of the Nuclear Engineering Department at UT, can you see any evidence of a coming nuclear renaissance based on increased interest in nuclear engineering careers among students?
Yeah, I certainly can in East Tennessee and here at the University of Tennessee. I think there's some data showing nationally there's no real increase in number of incoming students. But I know last year we had a 30% increase in our freshman students. And this year it may be even more than that. I think at this time last year we had 28 accepted our admission, and this year we have 44. So if we're not careful, we're going to need an even bigger building. We just got a new building 2 years ago, and it looks like we're already outgrowing it. Maybe my vision isn't big enough for the future.
So you are seeing evidence of some increased interest in nuclear careers as there's more and more talk about the resurgence of the nuclear industry after being dormant and somewhat anemic over the last couple of decades, really. But we see it coming back strong now in the future. Is that right?
There's a lot of it looks that way if you just look at the number of freshmen and the number of transfers wanting to come to the University of Tennessee and study nuclear engineering.
Well, very good. There's a lot going on in your region there in the Knoxville, Oak Ridge area. particularly in Oak Ridge, which has kind of become ground zero in a way for the renaissance of the nuclear industry with the work that's being done, cleanup work that's being done at the East Tennessee Technology Park. What factors do you think positions the Knoxville Oak Ridge area for a leadership role in a nuclear renaissance?
Well, I think we have a really strong concentration of nuclear companies here. I think we probably have over 150 nuclear-related companies within 50 miles of where I'm sitting right now. So I don't think you'll find that anywhere else in the United States. And I think we have a very nuclear-friendly community. We have the Manhattan Project, which started here. We have Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 Nuclear Security Complex. We have all these companies. So I think that the community is very welcoming to nuclear. I don't think you find that everywhere in the United States, but that makes a big difference. East Tennessee has what I would say is a very high livability factor. It's a great place for families to move. So it's a great place for companies to move.
And I guess we should also point out that East Tennessee is home to the Tennessee Valley Authority, which has a significant commitment in nuclear power.
Yes. And I also think we have a kind of advantage over other communities with the work that's being done with the cleanup at East Tennessee Technology Park. Taking all those acres and being able to release those for new nuclear, with 3 SMR companies coming and hopefully some other companies on the way.
Well, last year, Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee created the state's first nuclear advisory council, and you were appointed to that council as a member. And I'd like to ask you about why that council was formed and what its role is in the nuclear renaissance.
Okay. Yeah. So the governor developed a nuclear engineering fund, which is a $50 million fund, and then formed a nuclear engineering advisory council to help provide advice to how that fund should be utilized, with the real goal of bringing increased nuclear to the state of Tennessee. So the fund's actually administered by the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. And then the council was just there to provide some advice and some strategic plans to really further that goal. I think the focus is both on nuclear companies and the supply chain that would support those nuclear companies. And I'm the co-chair of the education workforce part of that committee. So the workforce is really part of the supply chain. It's a major supply. It's something that any company would need is the correct workforce. So our goal is to make sure that we have the right workforce that can both entice companies to come to the state of Tennessee, and then to make sure that the companies are successful when they get to Tennessee. And when we look at the workforce, we look at really where you have to start in K through 4. How do you communicate to the really young kids and get them to think about nuclear so later in their life they might want a nuclear career? Then you have middle school and high school. We're looking at the trades and apprenticeship programs, community colleges, universities. So we're really focused on education. The workforce is going, K through 12 all the way through PhD. Everything that the different types of companies would need to be successful.
Well, $50 million is a big commitment, and obviously the governor is seeing the opportunity that Tennessee has to build on its nuclear industry presence. The East Tennessee Technology Park, I would assume he would see that as kind of a springboard for this whole effort that's underway to attract more nuclear companies. The success that they've had there at Oak Ridge and in recruiting these new companies, he can see that as a real impetus for expanding the nuclear industry throughout the state.
Yeah, I think the governor does see that to grow additional jobs in the state of Tennessee, we really need to have additional energy. And with global warming, I think the governor sees that promoting more nuclear energy in the state of Tennessee is going to, in the end, promote job growth and really good industrial jobs for our residents. So really to set the state of Tennessee up to be the leaders in the nuclear position will, do two things. It'll bring jobs with the nuclear related companies, but also set us up as really the place of choice for future industrial investment for other companies.
I want to talk for a minute about kind of a special program that you have in your department. You joined with UCOR and Oak Ridge Associated Universities a few years ago in creating what is the country's first nuclear decommissioning minor. Can you tell us about that, what it is, and how important the role it can play in the future of nuclear energy?
Yeah, it's really interesting in how it came about. I was asked to introduce Eric Abelquist, who is the executive vice president of Oak Ridge Associated Universities at the time. I was going to introduce him for one of the Friday morning ETEC, East Tennessee Economic Council meetings. And his topic was on nuclear decommissioning. I hadn't really thought that much about nuclear decommissioning in the past. And when I saw his slide presentation and his talk, I was really surprised by how big the nuclear decommissioning job was in the United States. We're nuclear engineers. If you look at DOE nuclear engineering at the time, it had about a $700 million federal budget. But DOE EM, environmental management, had a $7 billion budget. So a budget that was 10 times as big. So for me, I'm thinking, well, there's 10 times as many jobs. This is a place that we need to learn more about and see how we can invest in it. So at the next meeting that we had with UCOR through a partnership we had with them, we talked about their need for more of a workforce in the nuclear decommissioning area. And we worked with them then to develop a curriculum. And if you think of what decommissioning is, it's kind of like deconstructing something, which the same tools that you use or the tools are the same that you use when you construct something. So we reached out to the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and took some of their classes and put it into the minor, the construction engineering, the project management type classes. So we developed an undergraduate minor in nuclear decommissioning and environmental management. UCOR has been a fabulous partner with that. They have taken our students out to the site and shown them what the work is like. They've come in and had information sessions with our work. ATIBA, which is an organization that is really focused on the environmental cleanup work. They have been a fabulous partner with us, giving some scholarships to our students. We're really in a perfect place to be starting a program like this with all of the decommissioning and really the cleanup work from the legacy weapons sites that's going out in the Oak Ridge area, and then having an organization like ATIBA that has 150 members that are invested in this area. So we've had great partners, and I think the program's been very successful.
Well, you mentioned cleanup. What role do you think environmental cleanup at the DOE sites, like what's going on in Oak Ridge, what role does that cleanup play in advancing the nuclear renaissance? How important is cleanup?
So the life cycle costs of any nuclear power plant include the cost to decommission it. Eric Abelquist once said, there's only a few things in life that are certain, paying taxes, death, and decommissioning your plants. So when you build a plant, you're financially responsible to decommission the plant. And the cost that it takes to decommission that plant is going to be rolled back into the rates, the electricity rates that you're providing to your subscribers. So we need to be able to do it effectively, efficiently to reduce energy costs. And the cleanup going on at sites like at East Tennessee Technology Park, Oak Ridge, National Lab, Y12, those pave the way towards better and more fiscally beneficial processes that can not only be used at the legacy sites, but could also be used at decommissioned nuclear power plant sites. So I think what we learn there will help us decommission power plants in a more fiscally effective way, and that'll lower the energy costs, which will make nuclear energy more fiscally competitive with natural gas and other types of electricity production.
Well, finally, Wes, I'd like for you to give us your take on what you think lies ahead for the nuclear industry in the years ahead. Should we be optimistic that the nuclear renaissance is actually going to happen and that the U.S. is going to increase its reliance on nuclear power? Do you see it playing a bigger role as time goes on?
I guess for one thing, I'm always a little gun shy of using the term nuclear renaissance because over a decade ago, people were using the term nuclear renaissance and getting really excited about it. And then it kind of fizzled out. It didn't come to fruition. But I think this time, as we have a real global focus on global warming and the challenges that brings, I think we have a much greater opportunity to be successful. I think the world knows we need to do this. We need to quit burning fossil fuels. So I think we have a much better opportunity to be successful. However, I do think the federal government needs to step up and help us with making a commitment to assist with the first of a kind costs of new reactors. If you look at TVA, their first of a kind reactor, the small modular reactor that might go at Clinch River, there's some substantial costs about being the first to build anything. And those first of a kind costs are really first of a kind costs for the nation. I think TVA doesn't think the Tennessee ratepayer should have to pay for those first of a kind costs. That's something that we really need to do as a nation, and that the federal government should step up and help us with that. And I also think once we build that first reactor and we show that we can build it, at budget and that we can operate it in an effective manner at budget, that then even other countries throughout the world will look back to the United States and say, we want to start building your reactors. I think there's at least 5 countries right now that would like to build small modular reactors that are of U.S. designs, but they have the question as, why should we be the first to build it when the United States, hasn't built it yet? I think they see our Nuclear Regulatory Commission as the gold standard for the world in nuclear safety. And they'd like to see the United States build it first, and then they'll be in line to build it, to build those in their country. I think if we want to retain or strengthen our global presence and our global leadership in nuclear technology, that we need to move forward with the first SMRs and show that we're going to be those global leaders.
Well, Wes, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
And thank you very much, too. You have a great day.
Finally, we close this episode with a conversation with a seasoned veteran of the nuclear industry who has been involved in both the defense cleanup program and the commercial nuclear power sector. Our last guest is Jim Little, a founding member of the board of directors of E4 Carolinas. Well, we're talking now with Jim Little, and Jim is a very experienced nuclear industry veteran. He's been in the industry more than 50 years and worked with a number of companies in the industry, well-known companies in the industry. He is a member of the South Carolina Nuclear Advisory Council and a founding member of the E4 Carolinas Board of Directors. Welcome, Jim.
Welcome. It's good to see you. Good to be here.
Well, thank you. We're glad to have you. Jim, we want to talk to you today about the study that E4 Carolinas has done about the nuclear renaissance in 5 southeastern states. And let's start by talking about the organization a little bit. Tell us about E4 Carolinas.
E4 Carolinas is the only energy industry trade organization in the Carolinas. It was formed about 12 years ago. I was a founding board member. It was an outgrowth of of an organization called the Carolinas Nuclear Cluster, which I was the chairman before that. But we really saw, particularly in the Carolinas, a need to address the energy industry that was here, but it was kind of in the background, and kind of get them networking and engaging and training new and upcoming personnel in the industry about what the challenges were going to be, what was available in innovation. We also expanded that to educational institutions like the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, Clemson, the University of South Carolina State, which is the only HBCU undergraduate nuclear program in the state of South Carolina. Let's engage with each other, network, look for opportunities, collaboration. The days of the big conglomerates are gone, the big GEs and the big Westinghouses. Now it's a team sport. So it's not just all under one company. And we saw those opportunities, and we even broadened it beyond the traditional forms of generation like nuclear, combined cycle natural gas, into solar and wind applications, transmission and distribution, battery technologies, and those sort of things. And it's been wildly successful. Today we have 150 member companies in the two Carolinas, North and South Carolina.
Well, that's very impressive. E4 has done a study looking at the nuclear renaissance in 5 southeastern states, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Why were these states chosen as the subject of your study?
Well, there was a term I coined quite a few years ago we call the Fertile Crescent of nuclear. And if you look at a map of the United States and see the collection of the nuclear industry, it's largest in the Southeast, 25 operating reactors in there, utilities that were very successful, a large industry, government operations, the Department of Energy sites in Savannah River and Oak Ridge, 2 national labs, ORNL, Savannah River National Labs, and this pool of talent and capability, not only those major companies like the Westinghouses and the GEs, those kind of companies, but the second tier and third tier supplier companies, companies like Amentum and US Corporation and Fluor Corporation. We had that kind of synergy here. We said, hey, this is something we really need to examine. And that was under the nuclear cluster. Why we did this economic study was for a different reason. You find the industry that I've been in for a very long time always talked about how it's reliable and it's safe and it's resilient and those kind of things. But we came to the realization that no one really understood the economic benefits of nuclear power. And we decided to go catalog that. We found some funding from the U.S. Department of Commerce to go do this study. So we employed a research economist from the University of South Carolina to do this study, along with a lot of the membership of E4 that contributed to the study. And we found some results we thought were pretty surprising and would be very useful for the public at large to understand. And that was the purpose of this economic study. In going further, it not only highlighted the existing operations in that thing, but what was the potential for new economic growth should new nuclear come. And we've seen a lot of interest right now in new nuclear, a lot. In the small modular reactor, the advanced reactor concepts, you've seen what Jeff Lyash at TVA is doing, the Clinch River site, the Department of Energy, Congress appropriating $1.9 billion this year for the new nuclear technology and developing that to the next really wave of innovation in nuclear. The last wave was more renovation. How can we do nuclear better? Modularity and those kind of things. The new innovation is coming in advanced fuel cycles, safety resilient designs rather than having the expensive capital costs of adding more and more safety features. We designed a reactor that needed less safety features, was simpler to operate. That would be it. So that was really the purpose. And we found the results were quite surprising when we looked at them.
Well, let's talk about the results. You had some pretty impressive statistics in the study about the impact of nuclear on the Southeast economy, pointing out that 25 of the nation's 94 reactors are located in this 5-state region. And we also get 37% of the electricity in 5 states compared to 19% from nuclear.
Double the U.S. average.
Double the U.S. average. So talk a little bit more about the economic impact of
For the 5-state region, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee, the economic benefit, well, I'll call it kind of the GDP of nuclear, and I'm talking broad nuclear, not just utility operations, but Department of Energy operations, those kinds of things, sub-suppliers and that, was $43 billion a year, employing 153,000 people. Amazing. And they were earning a median wage of $89,000 a year, which is 65% higher than the median of all other jobs. So it was economic benefit, 43 billion, high wages, lots of employment opportunities. And then the result was also it generated tremendous tax revenues. Tremendous tax revenues. For example, the state of South Carolina and Tennessee, for example, get about $1 billion each a year in tax revenues. So if you're looking to fund state programs, okay, for other sources, that comes from those businesses and their employees contributing those taxes to the tax revenues to support the state's initiative and its program, infrastructure development, education, those kinds of things, social programs, those kinds of things. So, and that was just in a 5-state region.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's focus on Tennessee for a minute.
Okay.
You brought up TVA and the Clinch River site earlier. DOE at Oak Ridge, along with its contractor UCOR, they completed a cleanup of the old Oak Ridge gaseous diffusion site. It is now known as the East Tennessee Technology Park, and that site is attracting a lot of nuclear companies. They're coming there in good numbers with their advanced reactor concepts and are being part of the nuclear renaissance. What role do you think Oak Ridge is playing or can play in the future of nuclear energy?
Well, I think the thing you can, and let's take UCOR as an example, probably the most successful EM program in DOE, the most successful, run by people that I know, okay, people that I used to work with. Back 15 years ago, I was running operations at ETTP, waste management, waste processing, and those kind of things. So the successor companies, which were US Corporation and now Amentum and those other partners, they've done a fantastic job. And I think what that shows is when you get focused and you get an energized and talented workforce, you can about accomplish anything. And they have a workforce that has a safety aware kind of workplace mentality, a security mentality, all the elements that you need for developing new nuclear in a large workforce in an environment which is very pro-nuclear. Look at the governor of Tennessee. He just formed a nuclear advisory council. We have the state of Virginia has done the same thing. The state of South Carolina and North Carolina. So you're seeing, the political forces line up behind nuclear. One of the interesting things right now, nationwide, is that nuclear is enjoying bipartisan support, which is something you don't hear about much these days, but they do on nuclear. So on the Democratic side, the Republican side, they look at this is the way to go. So Tennessee, which, its numbers are $9.7 billion a year, okay, about $1 billion in tax revenues and 40,000 employees. Now, the majority of those, or half of those, work at Oak Ridge, okay? So if I got an infrastructure and a large site like that, where would you ever want to locate a test reactor, research reactor, or the first SMR? It would be in that neighborhood. It would be in the Clinch River site, okay? You've got the talent. You've got a national lab resident right there. You're not that far from Savannah River National Labs, so those labs can complement each other. You've got people in this industry that lived in former lives in nuclear development. My own career, I worked for Westinghouse for 25 years, probably worked on 44 different reactors around the world, okay? So as that market slowed down and those projects completed, companies like Westinghouse and others focused on the Cold War legacy and cleaning up those, but they have that knowledge of of those original reactor developments. So you've still got those project skills, you've got the workforce talent. So it's really a very unique situation.
Well, Governor Lee in Tennessee, he did form the state's, I think the state's first nuclear advisory council.
Right.
But he also earmarked $50 million in the state budget to recruit nuclear industry to the state, building on what's going on in Oak Ridge. And what do you think that a commitment like that says about the nuclear renaissance in the state of Tennessee?
Well, if I'm a company that is looking to develop in this area, there's no better clear signal than a state raising its hand and saying, hey, we'll help you. There's no clearer signal than that. Okay. So that gives the green light to say, hey, if we're going to look at a place, Tennessee's got to be on our list. And you've got a large nuclear operating utility there. You've got, Jeff Lyash running that, a former Duke and Progress guy, running TVA. TVA's made a big investment in advanced nuclear. Okay. They're operating nuclear utilities. So, I don't see any obstacles in the way, like, well, we're not so sure, or politicians kind of playing which way the wind is blowing. It's a clear signal.
If we're going to have a successful nuclear renaissance, there has to be an adequate workforce, a trained workforce to meet the needs of a growing industry. Let's talk about that. Where is this workforce going to come from, and what needs to be done to ensure that we have enough qualified workers for these companies as they grow?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. You have an existing workforce of 40,000, for example, in Tennessee. Very competent, very skilled. Okay. But as we know, the workforce gets older and older, and I'm one of those older kinds of people. Okay. What you've got to do is to develop those internship programs, those development programs, vocational skills training, those kinds of things, encouraging young adults to get in the trades business. Okay. Not everybody has to go to college to be successful, to be financially stable. There's a lot of work being done right now to employ, young adults into the trades. Okay. Welders, technicians, construction workers, in employing those. And I think what you saw in the original wave of nuclear, going on 20 years ago now, that there was a lack of people in the construction trades. We also had a downturn in the economy there. A lot of people got out. Okay. And so you're always struggling for a skilled workforce. And now with the economy actually on the rise, okay, you've got good conditions going on. You've got a signal that, hey, look, energy is our security, folks. Okay. It's our security. It can be disrupted. Okay. In crazy kinds of ways. Look, the whole Russian, attack on Ukraine disrupted the oil and natural gas supply in Europe. And so what happens now, natural gas goes to Europe to supply their needs. The price, supply and demand goes up, the price goes up. Natural gas prices are increasing. You saw the weather events in Texas a few years ago, where even the natural gas plants were going down. And now you're looking at nuclear as being a resilient kind of technology. We're now going to 2-year refueling cycles. So I don't have that disruption of energy supply kinds of issues. Very, very robust and resilient kinds of supply. And it's going to play in a portfolio that's really neat. Look, renewables aren't bad, okay? But renewables rely on base load as their virtual battery. That's really what they do, because the battery technology is not quite there to support an entire grid with renewables alone. So you need those baseload things. You've seen the whole issue about global warming and carbon releases. You got the volatility of fossil fuels. Hey, wait a minute, nuclear is a good thing to have in your portfolio. And so I think that resilience kind of thing has come into play. And so that's why nuclear is enjoying a new look again. And if we can get past the challenges of the first of a kind units, like the ones at Vogtle and Virgil Summer, and look at these smaller modular kinds of design, which are manufactured and not constructed, now you're talking about a whole new realm of possibilities.
Well, we recognize that DOE has both a legal and a moral responsibility to clean up these unused, contaminated Manhattan Project sites, Cold War sites. How important do you think cleanup is to advancing the future growth of the nuclear industry?
Well, I think what the cleanup does is two things. First, it sends a clear signal that we can address any issues of the past. And we're talking things that happened in the late 40s and 50s, where things weren't really, there was no environmentalism then. It was like, hey, we're going to win the Cold War at any price. You look at Hanford, look at Savannah River, the tank farms, those kind of things. The things at Oak Ridge with the gaseous diffusion plant. We're going to make this stuff. And we won the Cold War. Now we got to clean up that mess. So it says a clear signal, hey, nuclear going forward, we know how to do this. Two things. First, to address any waste kinds of issues, but two, how to prevent them, how to design for the life cycle, not just we're going to build this reactor, but we're going to address the recycling of spent nuclear fuel. We're going to have new advanced fuel cycles, which won't produce a large volume of unutilized uranium and a large volume of very, very, very long-lived nuclides. He's going to have shorter nuclides, fast reactors. They can take spent fuel, process and produce now a profile for long-term disposal of nuclear waste. It's going to be in the hundreds, not millions of years, the thousands, not millions of years, reducing by a factor of 1,000. So it sends that clear signal that, hey, look, we know how to do this. That's what so you've got an obligation to do that. Okay. And it creates with these sites like Savannah River and Oak Ridge, what better site to locate these reactors at? Is an informally utilized site that is now cleaned up. In a sense, it's a brownfield site. Okay. It'll be done for, the economic development you're seeing in Oak Ridge, ETTP, but there are other locations. Hey, wait a minute. You've got the workforce location. You've got skilled workforce local and nearby. Hey, why not put a reactor at Clinch River? Why not do that there? Why not look at a small modular reactor at Savannah River? Hey, this is a win-win. We don't have to go through that. You've got the security workforce in place that knows how to do these kinds of things. You've got the infrastructure, you've got the talent, and you got the location. So I think it's kind of taking a problem and turning upside down into an opportunity, showing you can do it, and then to reutilizing it.
Well, let's close our conversation today by talking about whether we can feel confident that the nuclear renaissance is real. A lot of us got excited a few years ago when utilities were announcing a lot of new nuclear plants. TVA, for example, had 17 units on the drawing boards at one point. Right. But a lot of those were never realized. They never materialized because of decreasing demand and just problems with acceptance of nuclear in general. Do you think we have should we be confident in the nuclear renaissance? Do we have a reason to be excited about the comeback of nuclear?
Well, I think talk about it in terms of driving force and solution. The driving force, if you go back to the renaissance of 20 years ago, 2004, the demand curve flattened out for two reasons, maybe two and a half reasons. First, the nature of economy was changing. We're going away from manufacturing, heavy energy industry, to service kinds of economy. And the second thing was that the effects of energy conservation, energy efficiency were taking place. So it took out that growth curve. It really did. It took it out and it flattened out. Now let's add 2008 with a recession, and then demand goes way down as the economy slows down. It uses less energy. And now it's different. Now we're seeing the return of manufacturing capability back to the United States. We're seeing also data centers. I took a client to visit a reactor vendor, and they were looking at a 300 megawatt design just to supply their data centers. Okay, because they need 24/7 data centers. You know what happens when the internet goes out? Well, in the business world, it's total chaos. So now we're seeing, hey, wait a minute, let's get back to some resilient kinds of things. We've seen the disruptions elsewhere in the world. Okay, we've seen natural gas. We've seen some of its volatility. It's half the carbon output of coal. Coal's no longer going to be there. Now, if we can produce these reactors, looking at the lessons of the last two reactors built here in the States, and then looking overseas at what's being done, hey, this is entirely feasible. People think that every nuclear plant takes 12 years to build. It's not true. I was at Kashiwazaki probably 5 or 6 years ago, and the Kashiwazaki units were built side by side, 38 to 42 months, and they're ABWRs, very large-scale reactors. It can be done. It's the companies that need to organize to formulate the teams, get the right regulatory kind of structure in place, and there's a lot of work being done with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to reframe these regulations to fit advanced designs, not the designs of the past. So, the demand is coming back. Okay. The solution's sitting there. A lot of money is being invested by companies in new nuclear, a lot of money outside of government funding. I've done work for TerraPower, Bill Gates out in Seattle. Okay. It's $100 million a year of his own money he's putting into that. There are people out there with test programs right now. You've got Natrium, you've got Kairos. I think I counted the other day, there were 54 different designs around the world for small modular reactors, 54. So people are putting their money where they believe the future is, and I believe the future is there. One thing I'll leave you, that economic study, if you read it closely, there's a lot of detail in there. For new nuclear, once the new nuclear is built, for every $100 that's spent, it produces 200 in economic development. If you look at the for every 10 jobs in nuclear, it creates another 18. Now we look at innovation. You look at Greenville, ICAR, the BMW thing, great success, lots of things. We make BMWs to ship to England, in South Carolina, ship them out of Charleston, right? And they're right-hand drive cars, right? So we do that. Its multiplier is less than nuclear's, and we call that a success. So that's one of the reasons why in this economic study I said, hey, we've got to tell people what we found. This is amazing things. And getting our policymakers to understand these benefits, getting the public to understand the benefits of these things. If you've got adult children, you're saying, hey, where could they go? They don't have to go anywhere. They can stay here. They can stay in this location. They can have great careers with good salaries, nice living conditions, and a great environment.
Well, Jim Little, distinguished nuclear industry veteran and founding board member of E4 Carolinas, thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I was glad to tell the story.
Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world.